summer, I was delayed in getting to my workplace. A river of about 10,000 young people streamed along the Royal Mile on their way to our Scottish Parliament. With great enthusiasm and much flag waving, they poured down the old High Street to present their petition and peaceful protest to challenge the government to deal with the climate crisis. Nobody mowed them down with machine guns or put them in prison. Probably none of them would have realised where this freedom to protest and petition Parliament came from. Human rights for us in the West are just taken for granted. God spoke through Isaiah the prophet with these words, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke?" In the year 1638, at an early hour, it seemed that the whole city of Edinburgh was astir and moving en masse. They came in small groups and crowds, converging on Greyfriars Kirk. Some were chatting excitedly, but others were deep in their own thoughts. Over the next few days, it was estimated that about 60,000 people had come to support this special event, a remarkable number since the population of the city was then only about 40,000. Of all the milestones in the history of Scotland, 28th of February 1638 stands out as being one of the most important. It was the date of the signing of the National Covenant in Greyfriars Kirk, Edinburgh. This document has been called the Magna Carta of Scotland by some and the Fanatical Covenant by others. This document enshrined within its text a covenant of the Presbyterians to God that they would stand for their faith. It was the first time in history that almost a whole nation had covenanted with God, with the exception of Israel. Those who signed it were called Covenanters, and by doing so they were reaffirming their Reformed faith, at the same time as sending out a petition to the King and the authorities for freedom of faith and conscience in Scotland. It would trigger off a movement towards human rights, but the path ahead would end up being one of the darkest periods in our history. For Archibald Johnson, the lawyer who worked with Alexander Henderson to draw up the document, it was the gloriousest day that ever Scotland saw since the Reformation. It's important to understand the background to this event. During the Reformation, King Henry VIII broke free from Rome because the Pope would not allow him to divorce Catherine of Aragon and marry Anne Boleyn. Those hoping for an opportunity to leave the Roman Catholic Church with its corruption and tyranny welcomed this, because they thought that they would have the king's protection. Henry VIII was duly made supreme head of the Church of England in 1534. We had simply stepped out of the frying pan of the tyrannical Church of Rome and into the fire of the tyrannical kings. At first, this was just a problem for the English because England and Scotland were separate kingdoms. But when King James VI of Scotland was born in Edinburgh Castle, he went on to become King James I of England as well. The union of crowns in 1603 brought the two nations together under the same king, but King James also automatically became the head of the Church of England, thus setting a collision course with the Presbyterian democratic system he was supposed to uphold. When Charles I came to power, he forced his ways upon the Church of Scotland, dismantling the Presbyterian system, replacing it with political statesmen bishops. In 1637, without any consultation of the Church of Scotland and Scottish Parliament, he pushed the Episcopalian Book of Common Prayer upon the congregation in St Giles, the High Kirk of Edinburgh. This resulted in a riot as people thought that they would lose their freedom and be taken back to Rome. The result was that Reverend Alexander Henderson put together a national covenant document in 1638 expressing the desires of the Presbyterians for freedom to practice their faith before God. The document was in three parts. The first part was copied word for word from an early document of 1581, which King James VI had signed himself. The second part, including many references to the legal agreement of the Scottish Parliament to the Presbyterian Church, and the third part pulled the whole covenant together. The first national covenant was signed in Greyfriars Kirk by the Lords and Barons of Scotland, and then copies of this document were signed throughout much of Scotland by tens of thousands of ordinary people. When the king's official came to investigate, he had to pass a line of about 60,000 peaceful protesters stretching from Musselburgh to Edinburgh. The petition was presented to King Charles I, who saw it as high treason, and he gathered an army to invade Scotland. The people who had signed the document were called Covenanters, and they decided to prepare for battle in self-defence. Thus the civil wars in Scotland and England began. On one side were the Presbyterians, Puritans, and Parliamentarians. On the other side were those who supported the king's autocratic rule. A second document, called the Solemn League and Covenant, was drawn up in 1643 by the Reverend Alexander Henderson on the request of John Pym, the Puritan leader of the Parliamentarians. This document mirrored the National Covenant, but added some lines to preserve the rights and privileges of the parliaments and the liberties of the kingdoms. At the end of the civil wars, the staunch Roman Catholic King James VII was sent into exile to France, and the Protestant Prince William of Orange in Holland and his Scottish wife Mary Stuart were co-crowned in Westminster in 1689. They willingly accepted two documents, the Bill of Rights for the English and the Scottish Claim of Rights for the Scots. Presbyterians and Puritans who had fled from persecution to America took their cherished beliefs with them, and realising that they could have the chance to start a new constitution, broke free from the British Empire through the signing of the American Declaration of Independence in 1776. Shortly after this, in 1789, the American Bill of Rights was signed, which in turn became a blueprint for the 1948 United Nations Charter for Human Rights. And so, what began with the National Covenant being signed here in Edinburgh in 1638 ended up with the human rights movement that affects us all today. We hope you have been inspired and challenged by this video. Christian Heritage Edinburgh is a charity and ministry, and we seek to bring out the amazing story of the Christian faith in this city and nation, which has had such an impact on the world. If you have any questions, please contact us on this email address: info@christianheritageedinburgh.org.uk, or if you would like to find out more about how you can know Christ personally, then click the link in the credits or go to www.christianheritageedinburgh.org.uk.